In the 2026 NBA Draft, the San Antonio Spurs select Jaden Quaintance from the University of Kentucky.
The San Antonio Spurs made one of the most fascinating selections of the draft when they used the 20th pick on Jaden Quaintance, a player whose entire future may come down to one major question mark: his knee. This could end up being one of the smartest value picks of the next decade, or it could become a reminder of how much patience an organization needs when betting on a player with medical concerns. Quaintance brings a rare physical profile, standing 6'9" barefoot, listed at 6'10", weighing 255 pounds, with a massive 7'5" wingspan. Before the injury issues, his freshman season showed exactly why teams were interested, producing rebounding numbers in the 99th percentile offensively and the 93rd percentile defensively, while his help defense impact ranked in a similar elite range. His athleticism grade from available tracking data sits at a 9, and his rebounding grade is an 8, showing the type of physical tools that are difficult to find. But the medical concerns are impossible to ignore. After returning from surgery in December, Quaintance experienced complications and only played 4 games before not appearing again after the first week of January. Multiple teams reportedly had serious concerns about his medical situation before the draft, but San Antonio believed the upside was worth the risk and decided not to pass on him. What makes this selection so interesting is how well the fit lines up with what the Spurs actually need. San Antonio is building around Victor Wembanyama, a 22-year-old center who has already become one of the most disruptive defensive forces the NBA has ever tracked, especially when it comes to forcing opponents away from the paint. Because of that, the Spurs are not looking for a traditional backup center who needs touches or offensive responsibilities. They need someone who can protect the rim when Wembanyama rests, defend without demanding the basketball, finish plays above the rim when opportunities appear, and create an impact without disrupting the offense. That need is clear because Wembanyama's presence already changes how teams attack. Opponents think twice about entering the paint whenever he is on the court because his positioning alone creates a major deterrent. When he leaves the floor, San Antonio needs another big who can maintain that same defensive identity instead of forcing the team into a completely different approach. A smaller center or a switch-heavy wing cannot provide the same type of interior presence. The Spurs need size, athleticism, and defensive instincts from someone who can make opponents hesitate around the rim even when Wembanyama is sitting on the sideline. And when Jaden Quaintance is healthy, that is exactly the kind of player he has the potential to become.
Inbounds. On the other end, tackle for him, but he holds the record for most starts.
Quaintance spins to the hole.
Nice find. Quaintance pulls up.
When evaluators try to describe Jaden Quaintance's potential, the comparisons that come up most often are Robert Williams and Clint Capella, and that tells you a lot about the type of player people believe he can become. Those are not centers who built their reputation by dominating the ball or creating offense through heavy usage. Their impact came from everything happening away from the spotlight, protecting the paint, forcing opponents to change decisions, winning extra possessions on the offensive glass, and finishing plays above the rim when the opportunity was there. Before the knee injury became the biggest storyline around Quaintance's career, scouts who focused on defensive upside saw that same type of profile in his game. The Robert Williams comparison especially carries 2 very different meanings. On the positive side, it points to a player who can completely transform a defense without needing huge box score numbers. Robert Williams was the type of defender who changed what Boston could do on that end of the floor, making an impact that showed up in team performance even when traditional statistics did not fully capture it. That is the ceiling San Antonio is hoping for with Quaintance, a player who instantly raises the level of every defensive lineup he joins. But there is another side to that comparison that cannot be ignored. Robert Williams also dealt with repeated knee problems during his time with Boston, including multiple surgeries, and his availability became a major factor in his career path. That is the concern attached to any player compared to Williams, the possibility that elite talent and long-term health may not consistently exist together. San Antonio understood both parts of that comparison when they selected Quaintance. The comparison does not mean his career will follow the exact same path as Williams. It means the skill set, the upside, and even the medical uncertainty all fall into a similar category. Whether the injury issues become a recurring problem is something no pre-draft evaluation can completely answer. The reason the Spurs were willing to take the gamble becomes clearer when looking at where Quaintance was projected. Some mock drafts had him falling around 28, while others viewed him as a possible lottery-level talent. That massive range came almost entirely from the medical questions. If the knee concerns were removed from the equation, many evaluators believed his talent belonged somewhere in the top 15 to 18 range of the class. So at pick 20, San Antonio essentially grabbed the player with top-level talent potential while accepting the injury risk that pushed him down the board. That type of move makes more sense for a team with the right situation around him. The Spurs do not need this pick to immediately solve their backup center position. Luke Kornet can handle that role this season, while Quaintance continues recovering and works toward proving his knee can handle NBA-level demands. With Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, and Victor Wembanyama forming the foundation of the roster, San Antonio has the flexibility to be patient. And for a high-upside player carrying medical uncertainty, landing with an organization that has time and stability might be the best possible outcome.
And now Roach on the attack, it's set!
The lob, and Quaintance!
Jihad finds Quaintance. Quaintance spins to the hole!
The biggest weakness in Jaden Quaintance's game is on the offensive side, and that part of his evaluation has to be acknowledged. His three-point shooting numbers are extremely low, sitting around the 5th percentile, although the sample size is so limited that it is more of a sign that there is not enough evidence yet rather than a final judgment on his shooting ability. There are still some encouraging signs, including his 60% shooting on stationary two-point attempts last season, which hints that the touch is there even if the outside shot is not developed. For a player expected to fill a role similar to Clint Capella, though, becoming a three-point shooter is not the main requirement. The Spurs would need him to finish consistently around the basket, take advantage of the open looks created by Victor Wembanyama's pick-and-roll presence, and avoid becoming a problem when defenses force him to make simple offensive decisions. That is a much smaller offensive responsibility compared to what many other positions require. There is also the question of whether Quaintance's playmaking ability is developed enough to survive in an offense where he will not be a primary option. The answer right now appears to be solid, but not special. In limited opportunities, he showed he could attack downhill, create shots from the short mid-range area, and make reasonable reads as a passer before his knee injury interrupted his season. That does not project him as a secondary offensive creator. Instead, it suggests he has enough skill with the ball to avoid hurting the team during the moments when possessions unexpectedly come his way. For a backup center playing next to a player like Victor Wembanyama, that level of offensive reliability is valuable. But the real excitement around Quaintance comes from his defensive upside. If the medical concerns are resolved, many evaluators believe his defensive ceiling is among the highest in this draft class. His instincts are already advanced, and his movement skills stand out because his feet are unusually quick for someone with his size and frame. That is the difference between a big who simply stands near the basket and a true NBA-level shot blocker who can recover, rotate, and make plays across the floor. His help defense numbers, ranking in the 93rd percentile, show that he understands where threats are developing instead of only reacting after the play has already happened. Those instincts are usually something players have to develop over time, but with Quaintance, they already appear to be a natural part of his game. One of the most impressive defensive traits that stands out when watching Jaden Quaintance is how easily he moves side to side despite his size. A lot of big men who protect the rim are limited because they can only cover a certain area, giving offensive players enough time to see their movement and adjust their approach. Quaintance has shown a different kind of ability. His first step is quick enough that drivers who believe they've created space can suddenly find him already closing the gap. That type of reaction speed is extremely difficult to teach because it usually comes from natural movement ability rather than something a player develops later. And the early evidence suggests Quaintance has that rare quality that can allow him to impact NBA defenses regardless of the system San Antonio chooses to run. His defensive instincts also connect directly with what he brings as a rebounder. The 99th percentile offensive rebounding mark from his freshman season was not just about being in the right place. It showed a player who tracks the ball, understands where misses are likely to go, and attacks extra possessions with constant effort. That kind of rebounding mindset often lasts because it is built on anticipation and competitiveness, not only athleticism. Players who consistently chase the ball tend to keep finding rebounds throughout their careers, and Quaintance already showed strong fundamentals on the glass before his knee became the main focus. But the medical situation remains the biggest factor in determining his future. This is not a simple injury story involving a routine procedure and an expected recovery. His season included surgery, a return to action in December, complications afterward, and an early January shutdown that kept him off the court. Then, during the draft process, multiple teams reportedly had enough concerns about his medical evaluations to remove him from consideration. That makes this situation very different from a standard injury with a clean recovery path. The knee has already shown that it can complicate the timeline, and that uncertainty does not disappear just because draft night is passed. The Spurs are essentially betting that the surgery fixed the main issue, that the December setback was temporary, and that his rehabilitation will eventually allow him to contribute without the knee becoming the defining story. Because there's also a downside scenario where the talent never gets a fair chance, the injuries continue limiting him, and his NBA career never reaches the level many believe he is capable of reaching. The reality is, the worst-case scenario cannot simply be ignored because of Quaintonce's knee history. There is a real possibility that the injuries continue to limit him, and anyone analyzing this selection has to include that outcome in the conversation. But there's also a completely different path where the knee finally settles, San Antonio gives him the time he needs, and the Spurs end up finding a long-term defensive difference maker next to Victor Wembanyama for the next decade. And if that happens, getting that type of player with the 20th pick could look like a major win. The reason this gamble makes sense for San Antonio is because they're not depending on the selection to immediately carry the roster. The foundation is already built around Victor Wembanyama, Dylan Harper, and Stephon Castle. Those are the players who will determine how far this team goes. A young backup center who needs time to recover and develop into his potential is not a problem at this stage. It is a calculated investment in a player whose talent matches a major need on the roster. The fact that 19 other teams passed before San Antonio selected Quaintonce says something about how much the league values certainty when medical questions are involved. Sometimes teams become hesitant when a high upside player comes with risk, even in situations where patience could eventually pay off. The Spurs are one of the few teams that can afford to take that approach. They made the decision knowing exactly what the risk was and what the reward could become. Now, the next few seasons will reveal whether San Antonio's gamble was the right one. Was taking Quaintonce at 20 the smart move, or should the Spurs have chosen a safer player with fewer questions surrounding him? And how long do you think it will take before Quaintonce can become a meaningful contributor at the NBA level? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the next video on your screen.